time you invite, I used to miss it, and the loss was mine, not yours. Now, thank you for your kind words and so nice of you. Let me start sharing my screen and go through the lectures. And I hope all of you are able to see the screen. And or maybe that window I have to share through the window, Shiv Prasad. Do you suggest?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The window. So
You just say fourth button full screen. You can do it.
full screen I can do. Huh?
Yeah, last three buttons are available. No? You just click it, sir. Three dots are there.
Correct. I did that.
Under that, you just say full screen.
No, once I have to share this and then I have to do full screen.
Yeah.
This became I don't know what. I think let me stop sharing. Then I will go back.
No.
Yeah. No. I'll give me a minute.
Okay.
Give me a minute.
Fine.
Open it out. Yeah, it is here. Then I need to share this. Where did I go? Share, then window, then this screen. Share. Did it come? Not yet.
It's coming. It's on there. Yeah.
Yes. Now I should make it bigger, isn't it?
PowerPoint one.
I did that, no?
No, it's mirroring actually.
Oh, what happened? Oh my God! With all the preparation, still I should. It stops. Stop.
No, you just sir Control Alt Tab simultaneously. You can press it otherwise.
Control
Alt Tab.
Where is Alt Tab? Just now we had it, I think.
Yeah.
Alt and where is Tab? Yeah. Okay. Then I should. So whatever comes on the screen, that I should click it on that, isn't it?
Yes, sir. PowerPoint is there, no?
Right click, right?
Yeah.
I'm able to see it here. Screen. Oh. Are you able to see now? At least if the screen comes, it's okay. Are you able to see the screen?
No, sir.
Oh my God. With all that your training, still I am missing it.
No, sir. You can do it first. First thing you did it, no, like that you do it.
Stop. I will stop presenting.
Yeah, you stop sharing. Stop presenting. Yeah.
Then I'll press the arrow mark. Correct. Present now.
Yeah, you are right.
Now I'll present window. And
present window, and I think you have opened your PPT, no? PowerPoint is open.
Yeah, it's Now I think I opened
it. It is coming. Yeah, it is coming, sir. It is coming.
Oh, thank you very much. Maybe I'll try to make it bigger, full screen.
Yeah.
Full screen at the bottom right now. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Slideshow. I made that. It's not coming full screen.
Yeah, it's fine, sir. It's okay. No issues.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Maybe I don't know. Maybe my picture doesn't matter. I think let us not waste some more time.
Yeah.
Good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for accommodating me, Professor Shiv Prasad, you and your team. And as Professor Shiv Prasad said, been working in institute for a very long time. Joined as a student, and then recently formally retired from IAS. I'm going to talk about what's called smart water systems, and all these things we need to really work towards sustainable water supply. It's obviously that's our job, whether it is for agriculture, it is for drinking water supply, it is for industry, it is for whatever the purpose. The whole idea of all the hydrology, what we do, is to understand what type of yield we get, either surface or subsurface or whatever is the system. Then how do you enable it to really transport that water across to different regions where you require at that right time. So that way it's a very good combination between hydrology and hydraulics when you try to look at. And to enable this so-called the smart water systems, you need to really have many monitoring systems, control systems. Automatically, when we talk about smart water, it doesn't mean only the measurements, monitoring devices. It's also smart in a way how we handle the water system itself. Let us keep these things in the background. So some of these things I'll go through it, but some of you know, but I'll go through some of these slides. Obviously, one of the main problem is the population growth and rapid urbanization. Then supply of adequate and reliable safe water itself is a challenge we try to look at. And of course, when you try to look at India is the second largest populated country with about 1.3 billion people. Imagine the water supply to all these people in all aspects, whether it's irrigation, drinking water, whatever we are thinking about. Very large rural population is there. Then very slowly our urban population is growing. And of course, we have a lot of scarcity due to various reasons. Obviously, our water supply is intermittent when you try to look at, and then how do you address the issues? And basically, the all the intermittency is due to physical and structural integrity and things like that. And number of supply hours is very small, and obviously a lot of cross contamination can happen. And also the aging infrastructure breaks. All these things also puts a challenge because we are unable to spend the type of resources required to maintain them. So when you try to look at the integrated urban water management, we are going to talk about it much later also. So you obviously have its different segments of the intersection. Obviously, ultimately, you really require the portable, sustainable water supply, which obviously from the catchment it has to come. You have the demand management you need to do at the end of the source. You need to really look at the whether the possibility of using the wastewater into circulation in terms of grey water recycling or black water recycling. Sewer flow management we need to really look at, and storm water and rainwater harvesting. This is one of the key things when you try to look at in terms of the urban hydrology. Can you really look at the managing the storm water, can managing the rainwater harvesting locally, and how are you going to put the storm water to reuse? These are some of the challenges when you try to look at. So what we talked about here itself, we are trying to look at this is a general water supply scenario in any city when you try to look at. And please keep in mind your urban hydrology into context. And all these things, obviously, many of these components will come into that picture when you're trying to talk about.
Sir, slides are not moving. Slides
Oh,
are not moving.
oh, thank you. I'm moving the slides here. Wow. Okay, sorry about it. I'm moving the slides. Oh, okay. Then I need to go back.
It has moved, sir.
Huh?
Now it has moved. It is in a general water supply scenario in a city.
Okay. Thank you then. I think good. Thanks. I think some of you, yeah. Sorry, I think it how it depends on first of all the bandwidth at my end and bandwidth at each of your end. It all depends on that. Maybe I think Professor Prasad, you or Mrs. Prasad one of you can telling me whether it is working or not working once in a while. Okay.
Sure.
So I'm in slide 4, general water supply scenario. Okay.
Yes, sir. It's fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sorry about it. I think
it's fine.
Okay. So when you try to look at, obviously, one of the main stresses on water resources when you try to look at, many people would have already talked about it, but definitely I want to emphasize that we are going to go through it. The urbanization and climate change. We call it double-edged sword, which is going to hit many of our cities. And then all the more the challenges in terms of water resources, what happened to the city. When obviously try to look at, these are all the general which we know, but making it happen is the most challenging one. When you try to look at, you have surface water, you have groundwater, then you have alternate water sources in terms of recycled water, treated water coming into picture. And obviously, when you try to look at in any of the surface water, obviously you need to treat it and use it and things like that. And of course, groundwater, we were all taught in old school of thought, where the groundwater can as well pump it and use it. All those doesn't fit in now. Obviously, you need to treat even groundwater also, because many places it's contaminated or whatever is happening in terms of TDF to even bacteriological contamination. You need to really treat it and send it to end consumers. So one of the other things of maintaining is how do you reduce the NRW, then how do you reduce the intermittent supply hours, how do you address the aging infrastructure. All these things come into picture when you try to look at. This will give you a snapshot of what really happens to water supply or possibly in a city. So basically we call it messy urbanization in our Indian context. You have rural to urban migration is very large. Many of our things they are expected. Now we are hovering around more than 30 to 35 to 40% of urbanization. It is expected to touch 50% in coming years. Imagine how we are going to handle. Many of you are all young engineers, researchers, scientists interested in water issues in all aspects. Hello, can you mute Professor Prasad? Can you request people to mute?
Yeah.
Okay.
You see,
Yeah.
I already requested many times. You please mute your audio, please.
Yeah.
IRA.
Yeah.
IRA, please.
Okay. So
IRA, you please mute your audio, please.
Rural to urban migration becomes a very, very important things. And of course, there is a very rapid expansion of urban areas. The planners, they draw it on the map. As a water resources engineer, your job is the most difficult one to supply water in all aspects. And of course, one of the things is merging surrounding villages. These are all connected. And of course, there is emergence of new cities, which it is there. It's an easy one to do. For example, it's always easy to plan a new city than to retrofit a old one. I think many of my own colleagues and experts would have talked about it, but then when you try to look at the climate change plays a dominant role in all these things, and we need to really get ready. There's a very, very clear evidence that the temperatures are rising. With the rising in temperature, automatically your storm bursts or the rainfall bursts are increasing. You have heavy intensity rainfall in a short duration, which is going to come and go. And in such a scenario, how are you going to handle water systems is a very, very challenging one. And these are all the maps. I'm not going to read that. These slides also will be available. I can share it through Shiva Prasad to all of you. There are a lot of vulnerable areas for climate change. And when you try to look at in many of these places, it's all mapped. Then how are you going to address these issues? Buffer yourself in terms of the climate change is a very, very challenging one. When we try to look at, we are talking about obviously irrigation to drinking water to industry, everything will all put together. And of course, we are all taught very simple cartoon, but then it gives a very, very clear picture in terms of you have a source, you have a pathway, you have receptor. Water moves through all these areas from the highlands to the midlands to the valleys. And in the process, it goes through various aspects of surface flow, subsurface flow, water zone flow, deep groundwater flow. And of course, with that, it also brings in the contaminants as it moves along. If it could be agricultural contaminants, it could be industrial contaminants, and all these things will end up in the rivers and the water bodies, what we are going to use for cities. And keeping in mind, how are you going to take care of it is the question, and how a very good balance between surface water and groundwater need to be taken care of. Whenever we talk about water security, obviously, when you try to look at now with the remote sensing and all these things are going to be available, you have not only the current maps, you have some of them, even the old maps are available. When you try to look at, many river courses may be shrinking when you try to look at. Then in terms of that, the water availability may be reducing, or the other way around, water may be moving very fast, and then unless you store it and it's already gone to the sea or wherever. So obviously the environment and ecology becomes very, very important. But at the same time, we should also understand there is a responsibility on all of us to make sure that the water security is there for cities. So that way, it's a very, very challenging one when you try to look at. So when you try to address the issues in terms of the source of water, you have rivers, streams, lakes, they are the main sources. And of course, when you try to look at, more than 70% of untreated industrial wastes are dumped into surface waters in our Indian system. Though very, very thanks to Government of India and then the Ministry of Environment and Forests and the pollution control boards and especially NGT, very many water boards and the whatever the municipalities are all being pulled up and requested them to treat water, but it's still a long way to go. Right now, we find a lot of industrial pollution, which is moving, or the agricultural pollution, which is moving around. And of course, obviously, because of that, you have a very large contamination. Groundwater, which is a supplementary source of water, is polluted. So with microbial and chemical contaminants, we were all taught, if you take the old book, we said the groundwater is the most pure, you pump it and then use it. It's no longer true. You have to really treat groundwater and look for all these pollutions. And of course, it goes without saying that there is a need to protect all the sources of drinking water. And of course, most important thing, regulate groundwater withdrawal. A healthy connection between surface water and groundwater is essential, which that is not there, you are going to have a lot of issues. Just to give some idea of water security, I'm just giving an example of Karnataka state. One can do such a water balance for any other states also. These are all published data, of course, what you can see here. Just an example, you have mainly Krishna, Kaveri, Godavari basins, and of course we have west flowing rivers, and also in a small way we have North Pennar and South Pennar basin, which is called Palar basins. In terms of the percentage, you can see there the water which is moving around, and I'm not suggesting that you should divert all the west flowing rivers, but just to get a feel for it, you have more than 2000 TMC of water moving out of Karnataka border into the sea. And one has to really think in what way we can manage, in what way is it possible to divert at least a very small percentage and we still keep our forest, environment, ecology in a healthy system. These are all the things one will need to really look at. At the same time, you can also see what happens to the Krishna Kaveri basin. First of all these things are as on today. Are we going to have such an yield in the coming years, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or 50 years? What is the change is going to happen to these water systems? This is the one which you really one need to really understand. That's the one really look at in terms of the hydrological studies. Most important thing is the environmental management. Drinking water catchments becomes very, very important. You need to really protect the human health. So obviously drinking water supply is the most important thing. The healthy catchment, then the transport, then the treatment, and then putting it becomes very, very important. There is a lot of health related risk assessment management system we need to really look at. Catchment activities obviously plays a dominant role in all these things. So it could be, for example, people talk about mining, it could be something else, and the whole your water systems getting contaminated. All this becomes very, very important. And the environmental risk assessment management, all that also need to be addressed in many of these things. And of course, the type of spatial croplands and forests India, they have changed from 1880. Data are all available. If one is curious to understand what happened to 1880 to 2010, these are all published data. You can see obviously land use, land cover, and land use pattern plays a dominant role in our water system. It's changed completely, obviously, because you have to grow food for a very large population. At the same time, we should also understand if you're going to change a lot, obviously it's going to affect your surface water and groundwater yields. So the effect of catchment contaminates water quality in terms of suspended solids, chemical hazards, inorganic chemicals, natural organic substances, anthropogenic organic chemicals, and of course semi-volatile organic compounds, arsenic, emerging pollutants in terms of the personal care products and PPC, microplastics, and etc. When you try to look at. This is the type of, the cartoon one can understand. You have the, in terms of lot of activities, what you can see, the domestic animals to the soil, the wildlife, and airborne exposure, and the runoff obviously going through the soil strata, and all this, the land use pattern due to various other human and animal activities and so many other things are bringing in its own form of contamination. And then in what way are going to really address these issues becomes very important in terms of fresh food, recreational, drinking water, stormwater, wastewater use. All these things indicate that a continuous monitoring from catchment to the consumer scale, consumer level becomes very important for you to really manage water systems. So of course, I don't go through this, but one should understand in terms of the hydrological cycle. All of us are taught in terms of the time of residence and the movement of this water when you try to look at from 1 week to thousands of years, which is there depending on the component of water, what you're talking about, whether it is in the surface, whether it is in the river, whether it is in the swamp, whether it is groundwater. So that way one has to really plan to understand what will happen to this water as it moves through. It takes so much of time for it to move through. In terms of the quality, equally important in terms of the quantity. If you exhaust, for example, the groundwater, in many places, it may take a very long time for it to recharge. Really, you should understand what you are going to do in terms of the extraction of groundwater. So obviously, in terms of when you try to look at the watershed as an activity, which is the very common way of looking at it, as you can see here, the earlier cartoons also we saw. You have natural processes, agricultural activities, industry, then of course the cities itself. Everybody is using water and contributing in their own way, and ultimately it will all end up in rivers and groundwater systems, and we move towards the sea. Unless a proper accounting in all the terms of quantity, quality issues at every stage is taken care of, it becomes a very, very challenging task to control these pollutants as the water moves. So that way the catchment conditions and transport processes becomes a dominant one. You need to really understand what happens in all these things in terms of the catchment inspection, overland surface to surface or near subsurface transport, control measures in agriculture, watershed development people talk about, and of course the direct precipitation, spillage or discharge into surface water, base flows or subsurface transport. Base flow is a dominant one in many places. These are all reducing. That's where the healthy connection between surface water and groundwater is lost when you try to look at. It's also possible you have the impacts of climate change on surface water quality, and I'm not going to read all that slide. You're going to have the retention, coagulation, degradation. So a lot of these climatic changes are going to affect the quality. You really need to really design the control and the efficiency to really understand what has happened to all these contaminants. How do you going to control all these things becomes very important aspect. This is a typical system for any city. When you try to look at from headwaters, that's the water will be brought into the treatment plant. Obviously, the headwaters has to be maintained very well, so that in terms of hydrological characteristics, land use pattern, all that need to be really understood very well, so that you have the continuous supply to the treatment plant. Once the treatment plant water is received at the treatment plant, we know you treat it to the required standards, supply drinking water distribution, drinking water system to the city, and then from the city the wastewater is collected. And in many places earlier we were not treating so well, now we are treating it to certain level, and in some cases even the secondary to tertiary level it's being treated, and then you put it back into the nalas, or in some cases we are going to reuse it. Equally important is in all these cities and elsewhere you are going to do the storm water system, harvesting system where possible, or allow that water system to get back into the nalas. So this type of activities, a complete control on the water balance of what happens in a city becomes extremely important. This will in turn will give a resilient water and wastewater infrastructure. If all these things are understood very well and then designed very well and then made it to run, you may have a good control on the water system. So when we try to look at the resilience of water technology to climate change, there are a lot of studies are conducted. There are categories in terms of category 1, category 2, category 3. And then in terms of the potentially more resilient is utility of piped water supply, tube wells, protected springs in the category 2, category 3, dug wells, rainwater harvesting, the sources could be. So when you try to look at, so the depending on the type of the things, some of them are highly resilient, some of them may not be resilient. So depending on what we are going to do, one can choose what we want to do. For example, in many cities, because of the growth, economic growth and the engines, you need a highly resilient, and then the system should run all the time. So when you try to look at water balance studies, whether at the sub-basin scale, basin scale, sub-basin scale, or it could be in a watershed scale, or more important, even a city scale, you really need to understand what is going to happen in terms of water balance. So obviously reliability, resilience, vulnerability becomes very important. And then water balance in terms of the precipitation, evaporation, storages, then utility, all this becomes very important. You need to really keep track of this to understand how to handle that system. To this effect becomes a lot of challenge in terms of the operation and maintenance. So it requires an ongoing planning and investment. A very large level of investment is required in maintaining the water systems, whether it is the transporting raw water, treated water to the city, or the treated water which is being brought into the city, distributing into the system, into the whole city, becomes a continuous monitoring, and then a lot of resources need to be put in to control the continual improvement of service, leakage management, water quality monitoring, pressure management. All this becomes very important. So to that effect, when management of runoff content for water becomes very important. In fact, in our system, many of these systems are working around the losses are something like more than 40%. So imagine that if you are able to bring down that 40% of wastage of water, or NRW, we call it non-revenue water, or unaccounted for water, UFW, if you can bring it to say a healthy 20%, 20% of the huge quantity of water you are saving. And then obviously it is almost like augmenting a new water supply, which could be used for other things. So that way a lot of water work is going on in terms of making this happen, but it's easily said than done when you try to look at. Equally important is because water is brought from a very long distances and then transported, and obviously all of us are taught that transporting water requires a lot of energy. So obviously huge amount of energy is used in moving water around, and in a way, if you can reduce this energy in terms of the what you spend, you are going to save not only the energy, you are going to indirectly save water itself, because a lot of water is required to generate this energy. So that way people talk about water energy nexus, in these things. And of course, they link it up with water, energy, food nexus, water, energy, food, and environment nexus, all that people talk about. We should understand that as much as possible, minimal energy we need to spend in moving water around, which is a very challenging task. And of course, the one way to do is this water conservation at a utility level, reducing non-revenue water, as I told you, and improving operation and maintenance. When you operate better, you are going to save it. And of course, the rainwater harvesting people are talking about, though it may look a very small one, but it plays a dominant role. We should understand when we talk about rainwater harvesting, we are talking about, it could be rooftop rainwater harvesting. It could be, for example, a catchment rainwater harvesting in a small scale. One can do that. So obviously the catchment itself, whatever falls on, you try to do the harvesting and store it in the local ponds and other things, which will definitely the groundwater this thing will improve. So in all, to do all these things, technology intervention for water is required. So obviously IoT for water or ICT water, people talk about water conservation for future generation. They talk about it. Obviously the cartoon is showing you in terms of what you can do. You can have a fully automated water system, real-time data acquisition can happen, proper asset management can be done, how the assets are behaving, early detection of events. An event can be a leakage or a cross-contamination is possible that can be detected, flexible to meet future challenges. In fact, the whole design should be, for some reason, there is a increase in quantity you need to pump or you need to do something else. There should be flexibility in the system or in the design itself. And of course, an online hydraulic modeling is required, quantity quality modeling, and one can have an automated control system. It is not any fancy thing. Many campuses are already running this. I will show you some of the examples. And many cities, developed cities across the world are running in such a mode. We need to really look at what happens. So when you try to look at IoT for water, the components, so in a smart water network, demand forecasting, risk maps, pressure optimization, NRW, all that becomes very important. To start with, you require a GIS. You may have the data of pipe burst prediction model. Definitely a hydraulic model is required. Sensors and actuators are required. Automated meter reading, SCADA, everything is required. Shiv Prasad, I'm audible, no? I think just tell me once in a way. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Thank you.
You are audible.
All these things are required to build that model and then take it forward, which becomes very important in any system. Though we may talk about this, for example, the only drinking water systems, imagine a flood control system, so similar things can be done. So maybe my hydraulic model could be slightly different. I may be talking about open channel model or something like that. And the levels I may be monitoring. All these things are being done and then being built and really required to understand. So when you try to look at monitoring and event detection, it could be leakage assessment, quantifying the water loss, techniques for quantifying leak, developing leakage management strategy, leakage monitoring in zones and sectors, pressure management. You can see the sketch. All these things are possible if you have a continuous data recording system, a good model, hydraulic model is running for it. You're able to detect the event. And then of course, based on the type of activity what you require, you need a special model to detect these things in terms of not only data handling. It could be a prediction model, it could be analysis model. There are various ways of doing it. When you try to do that, you are able to have control on the system itself. One of the typical things many of you would have designed and would have come across here is pressure management becomes a very challenging task. You have a reservoir. This is a very healthy system. Reservoir is there up a hill. You want to supply water to that valley portion as well as the elevated portion. As you can see here, obviously there will be a continuous pressure variation when you try to look at how are you going to control pressure so that the people in the valley portion as well as in the ridge portion, they get equitable pressure supply, whatever is required. This is a very challenging one when you try to look at in terms of pressure control. Now there are devices, there are other ways of doing it also. We need to really look at how to control the pressure in all these aspects. For this, people are already gathering a lot of data analytics. So putting the sensors, you can continuously monitor the things and get the data out in terms of very large frequency, where it could be in few minutes, few seconds, few minutes, few hours. Whenever we talk about the quality, we talk about in terms of a few minutes. Whenever we talk about the quantity, it could be slightly more time. But when you want to detect a leakage and other things, you require a continuous monitoring of the data. When you see the abrupt changes in this data, you can analyze that data and think that something is wrong and you really can predict some leakage is happening or something like that. And not only that, what we should understand, with all this data being collected, a very nowadays, obviously, data analytics plays a dominant role. Either machine learning, artificial intelligence, data mining, deep learning, all these tools, you can use it and train your model. You can train the model, and using the historical data, you can set the thing. And of course, the future, I can open this, especially for young researchers and all, future is in big data analytics. You need to really look at how to handle such a thing. Inequity in water supply is a part of the system, though nobody wishes that. We design it for equity, but then this is the real data. What we are talking about is about 83 DMAs in South Bangalore. There is a huge difference in the between the amount of water supplied and consumed, and not only that, the inequity is also a part. You can see the consumed is that mud color. The other one is UFW. In quite a few cases, more than 40-50% is the one which is lost. And you can see the bars are also changing. The inequity is there and the losses are there. How much possible you can bring in the equity is a very, very challenging task. In terms of this happens due to various reasons, in terms of the hydraulics infrastructure, in terms of supply hours, in terms of various other things. Inequity will become a problem in many of the cities. To measure this inequity, there are, I'm not good, I will only mention here, there are inequity index, which has come from economics, Lorentz curve and things like that, Gini coefficient. The healthy curve will be a 45-degree line, as you can see at the bottom in the 33, slide number 33. But then it will open out in terms of the cumulative percentage of population as you go. It deviates a lot. This is a part of the inequity. You might try to move as much to equity side as possible, because everybody should get their share of water. To do that, you need a lot of controls. To do the controls, you need a lot of monitoring. To do the monitoring, you need a lot of devices. You should keep that in mind. So obviously, when you try to look at there is a plan for 2031 Bangalore's water supply. It will reach about 2000, more than 2000 MLD. Currently, it's about 1500 MLD. When you try to look at in terms of the Bangalore water supply, the changes in terms of what is going to happen to that, there is a supply demand, then there is a very big gap, as you can see from the blue to green. And then as the population increases, demand also increases. With all these things, how are you going to make these things up as much as possible to equity you bring in? Not only these, for the whole city, across the city also, the lot of inequity will come. What you are seeing the slide is one of the areas in Mysore. It's a simple, when they talk about a 24/7 water supply, they bring water to a main reservoir. They call it mass balancing tank, MBT. Some of you would have done. On the right side, you are seeing the two peak curves which you need to match as per CPHEO. And the whole challenge problem here is, as you bring water, you need to fill all these tanks in terms of their supply. These tanks in turn will supply to the areas. And in a 24/7, imagine the number of walls are there, number of settings are there, how many settings you are going to make it, how you are going to ensure each tank will get their share of water without overflowing or without draining completely. This is an optimization problem which has been we have tried to address that, and we have developed a model for that, which has been applied in it's called, I think, German press area in Mysore, and then one more, some name I forgot. In that area, we have tried to apply that. And you can also ask, what are you going to do for big cities? It's not only for Bangalore, though I keep taking the example of Bangalore because I'm very closely involved with that. I'm sure many cities across India will be doing similar things. There is a strategic master plan which has been developed for Bangalore. I'm trying to look at, this was a project done by CS2M Hill. I thank them for sharing their slides with us. So the plan will be for another 30 years. How are you going to do that? How are you going to bring water? Already we have Kaveri stage 1, 2, 3, 4, stage 4, stage 5 is going to come. Then the recycled water is going to be brought in, and then some control on groundwater, and then the rainwater harvesting. So many, and also looking at various other sources. It could be from the western side of the state. It could be from northern side of the state, like Linganmukhi. So many things are being looked at. And of course, one can ask, is only the Bangalore in Karnataka? No, but we should also understand Bangalore puts in about 60% of the GDP to the whole state. So there is an obligation, obviously, to supply water. So wastewater utility is a key thing in a master plan. So one need to really understand how it can be utilized, how it can be put back into circulation. As you can see here, this is one of the slides of a city of Colorado, the Boulder, Colorado. Many cities are doing this and then trying to bring it to picture. Equally important is continual improvement of the existing infrastructure. As I mentioned to you, if you are able to reduce the NRW, is as good as bringing new water into the system. This is a live system which we are a part of it and trying to do it in South Bangalore, as L&T has done, trying to reduce water from 40% to about, they went up to 20-26%. Rainwater harvesting becomes very, very important, capturing water where it falls, reducing pollution, then replacing groundwater to recharging. If you collect it, the recharge will happen. I'll come to recharging as we go along. It's not that simple as we look at it, but that definitely recharge will happen. And of course, we need also, when you try to catch the rainwater locally, you are going to reduce the energy bill. We should understand. So all these things will happen. Of course, it also reduces the flooding. As you are able to catch the rainwater locally, you're not allowing it to move through the other areas. And what we are seeing here is the recycled water supply to Nadaprabhu Kempegowda layout. In fact, BDA has actually planned a complete system of a tertiary treated water system to supply recycled water to the whole area. Of course, there will be drinking water supply. There is a separate reticulation system for recycling water system. This also has a rainwater harvesting system. It's a new layout which has been planned by BDA. I'm happy to say that government is looking at such thing. And in any case, this is a photo of our own treatment plant. I'm going to talk about it, IAC treatment plant. What you see is the raw sewage on the left side, and the treated water you are seeing, the tertiary treated water you are seeing on the right side. It's a membrane technology plant which has been put, and these people are planning it to do it in the BDA layout. And all these things indicate that a continuous monitoring, hydraulic model, water quality model, data handling, all this becomes a part of it, automatically. So what you are seeing here is the IISc campus. In fact, we have 2.5 MLD recycling plant based on membrane technology, tertiary treated water. Many of us were involved. Professor Mujumdar, Shekhar, myself, many of us were involved in making it happen. It is running, and we are supplying recycled water for all the irrigation, cooling purposes, and definitely not drinking water. Other than drinking water, we are supplying. It's a variably speed drive, 24/7 on-demand supply. It is running. Any of you can come and see, which is running on IISc campus. So these things all indicate that how the stress on drinking water systems you can bring down into by doing all these things. Many of the campuses are doing it. IIT Madras, Infosys, of course, Wipro, many things are doing it. So city water cycle becomes very, very important. In fact, this is the city of Melbourne. In fact, I'm a part of the things in CPHUO core committee, and the MOHUA has also advised that many of the cities in India have to come out with their own water cycle or the water balance plans. To that, you need to understand how much water you bring in, how much water you generate through rainwater harvesting, how much groundwater is available, how much recycled water you can generate, how much you're sending it out, how much you're using it. All these things are very, very important. And in fact, government is actually pushing all the cities to come out with their own plan in understanding their water system. This is something the Melbourne city has already done it, and the Bangalore, Hyderabad, many cities are trying to do that. Similarly, many you would have heard about it, spawn cities in China trying to look at when the water falls, how much of recharge you can make it happen so that you are able to get the water as it moves around. And of course, we should also understand waterlogging and then creating flood is a big challenging task. We should also understand how to balance these things out. Many cities are looking at all these things to happen. Of course, it's a slightly older slide, but then we pump about 1,500 MLD of water to Bangalore right now. We have another 775 MLD of water is coming into Kaveri 5th stage. All these things I'm very, very closely involved. That's why I'm sharing it with you. And to that, about 30% of groundwater we are pumping, something like 400 to 500 MLD of water we are pumping. So roughly about 2,000 MLD of water is being pumped and which is being utilized. And of course, out of that, about more than 500 ml, 440 MLD of recycled water is being sent to Kolar. I'm going to talk about it. And to do the groundwater recharge. And equally important, another 300 MLD is also already committed for minor irrigation to fill up tanks. And for storage and recovery, this is many of you would have heard, and elsewhere in many cities are trying to do it. In Texas, they're trying to do, and then obviously even in Gulf countries, I have come across they're trying to do some of these things. And I think in some of the cities or nearby cities, they're trying it out, not with full success. We need to really understand how much you can store, how much you can pump, what you can do. In fact, some of the in small campuses we are trying out in a limited way. We are doing some project for BIAL Bangalore and then the ASC Center. We're trying to do that. And one need to really look at many of these new ways of handling water systems. So it's a very nice combination of hydrology, hydraulics, natural systems, and really look at how to manage water systems. Obviously, the whole thing is about the urban hydrology. Flood is one of the components of that. How are you going to harvest flood water becomes very, very important. It's obvious, if you can create storages, that's the way to do things. And then the footprint of the storages becomes very large. As long as you have the tanks and all things like that, you can store. Or even, for example, the out of the box solution, like you need to create storages, say below, it could be the below parks or elsewhere, or even to that some extent, the storages in basements and all need to be done so that you can harvest, so that the flood effect is reduced. Then you allow it to pump and then move on. This is what many cities and countries are doing. We need to really look at. There is a natural system of controlling flood. There is also an artificial. You can create storages to do that, or you need to really pump it out and send it across. If many of you are interested, you can look at what Tokyo City does for its floodwater harvesting. I think to this extent, I want to just share it with you some slides. In fact, it's very rare where where we are trying to look at in terms of harvesting floodwaters in a part of the Bangalore city, and a stormwater drain has been modeled, scaled model has been developed. It's a part of the ITRA project, which Professor Mujumdar, myself, we did that study. We have developed the scaled version of the model in the lab, trying to understand how the blockages will affect the floodwater movement or the stormwater movement. And of course, it's a fully instrumented one. We try to look at what can happen to that. So a physical model is built. Many of you know the hydraulic model, how it is built, and the aspect ratios are different here in terms of the depth and the width. And we conducted complete experimental program. We did that. We also developed a CFD model to understand, instead of doing the experiment in the field, which you cannot, we obviously a controlled experiment can be done in the lab to understand how the system behaves. So this is the experimental results. We developed a CFD model. We tried to send the scaled version of the flows, and we also compared the experimental and numerical results. And ultimately, we compared what happened in the field vis-a-vis in the lab. We are able to generate the model. It's the first time a stormwater drain has been completely modeled and understood. In fact, we created what you can see there is the blockages which we could create in the lab to understand how these systems behave. All these things can be done to understand and to build these things in a better way. One of the very important projects, which in fact I'm a little upbeat about it, is the transferring the secondary treated water from Bangalore, KC Valley to Kolar to fill 138 tanks. In fact, 126 was the initial design. Now it's about 138 tanks are being filled in Kolar. And all these things, the effect will be obviously the treated water, secondary treated water is not tertiary treated, or used to filled in terms of pumping and as well as gravity. All the dotted lines indicate gravity flows. All the full lines, the red lines indicate the pumping flow, pumping system. It is done at several places to fill a very large number of tanks. I'm going to share it with you few photographs, how these systems are running. And then definitely it has improved a lot in terms of groundwater recharge. Already is happening. These are all the tank. This is one of the first points, the Lakshmi Sagara Kere, what we call it. Kere in Kannada means the tank. As you can see here, this has been created. And as you can move, we have many tanks which has been filled up. Obviously, as you expect, this is going to do the local recharge of groundwater system. And not only the water for only human consumption, it has completely changed the environment and ecology of all these areas, as you can see here, in terms of the lotus and other things. And I'm very happy to show you in terms of, I think some birds must also be there, yeah, which are all coming. So I think a lot of things can be done by transferring such water and then making it happen. Similar thing, people are trying to do it in Vrishabhavati Valley across. And of course, it's just I'm giving you some examples only about Bangalore and surrounding areas. I call this, with these things, I call it Bangalore no longer a sink. It is a source for the neighboring areas also. That's what. And I'm sure many, many cities across India are already doing or planning to do such activities. And of course, you need to really require a water security. That means, when you want the water, it should be available, how you want it, what the quantity of water is required. And coming back to Bangalore itself, you have zones, divisions, subdivisions, wards. Wards is a municipal area. At every level, the inequity persists. So if you want to make it equity at a zone level, is it at division level? Is it at a subdivision level? Is it at a ward level? How do you bring in as much as possible the equity is the question. And to do that, you need a very, very large number of controls and to make it happen. And of course, this is an imprint project which many of us are doing in terms of many scientists from Robert Bosch Center and then our own hydraulics group we are trying to do. So we have, this is in South Bangalore D2B area, about 180 square kilometers. We are trying to look at a large number of measurements are got from the water board, as well as we have also made a lot of measurements trying to understand the complex water distribution networks, to explain inequity among the DMAs, to identify candidate DMA for, we have already done that, JP Nagar, develop water quality models, and control and scheduling of water supply. As you can see, not only IISc, BWSSB, L&T, many are partners here. And to help BWSSB translate our algorithm into practice, we are trying to look at, and many water, packages, work packages are already developed. I'm not going to, we are almost in the field implementation thing, trying to look at the water balance at various levels, try developing algorithm for leak detection, localization, and the average decay rate estimated for continuous intermittent supply we're trying to look at, and identifying critical control valves, which one you need to control for what water supply we are trying to look at, and all these things are being developed and possibly will be implemented along with BWSSB's help. So this is the type of the continuous monitoring. The data will come in. It's the real-time data. As you can see here, I'm only showing a snapshot of it. As you can see, the supply and then other things at various times. One can, more the data you can analyze, and then you can come out with your own conclusions and what can be done. And of course, there is a lot of leak detection. It can be done through experimental automation, which will run on required time for flow and no flow conditions. Same model can be used to introduce periodic fluctuations. You can really look at what can be done. And also, they require problem for all conditions to have the same when running the experiment. I'll show you, we have a small experimental setup in the lab where a controlled experiment for leak detection can be done. And all these things are possible when you have a controlled system. In the next slide is going to come. In fact, this is the system. It's a lab view, but we have a real system of where we have the different pipelines, materials. We can control any pipeline we want. We can create a leakage what we want. Leakage is nothing but a data point. And continuous monitoring and time series data can be utilized to predict the leakage model. That's what we are trying to do it here. I'm going to move faster because I have so many other things to talk about. So any abrupt changes will tell you something is not okay, and then you really need to really look at the leak detection. This is one of them when you try to look at, and we have obviously developed some log likelihood models and things like that when you can predict the leakages and all. The same leakages also can be controlled to pressure management system. So when you try to look at it, it's possible to look at the pressure management. So there is a background leakages can be created, and then because of the pressure control, so higher pressure will involve in more leakages, and the DMA is different from the pressure management, pressure control systems, the areas. So using such techniques, we have developed different hydraulic models in terms of the different methods as listed here, in terms of the fixed outlet method, flow-based modulation, time-based modulation, remote nose-based modulation, and all these things using the pressure control. Which control valve will control which area? Such things we have actually developed models, and then we try to put an optimization and understand how these things can be controlled. And not only did we developed the model, we applied it on a small network in Coorg area and the real-time data to control the leakages. As you can see, the network details are given here, measurement devices were given here, flow meter at the inlet, pressure sensors. So NRW was 24%. With the control of these wall devices, we were able to reduce the leakages, as you can see here. So basically, the whole thing is about how to control the pressures in water networks with multiple internal PRVs for NRW reduction, sectorization of water networks into pressure management areas. These pressure management areas are different from the DMAs because one wall will control something different areas. So how do you optimize it? How do you control? How do you bring down the leakages is the one which we are trying to ask. Obviously, all these things are control based in each one of them. So development of the hydraulic model, network sectorization, pressure minimization, and leakage reduction. That's the area. And using which simple tree networks, which wall will affect which area. We have the optimization model, all that. We did this with Hitachi. One of my students, she's working there in Hitachi, Anjana Rajkumar. We did that, and in fact, it's in Urban Water Journal. This paper is available. Any of you can see that. So what I want to say, I think we optimize, and I'm going to move faster just to show that the reduction in the leakage, I want to show it here. So ultimately, the multiple PRVs, single PRVs, before the control, we had 24% NRW. With multiple PRVs, we brought it down to 18%. With only a single PRV, we could bring it down to 22%. And of course, when you try to work it out in terms of the money, what you can see here in terms of the thing. So the whole thing indicates to you, though it's a very small area, it is possible to control leakages through PRVs. And all these things are controlled valves, and then the smart water systems, you need to really analyze them to really bring down the leakages. So when you try to look at the supply to the city, as you can see in terms of comparing different cities across India, we are on the average about that 120 plus 100 around that LPCD of supply. And also the bar plot of supply indicates in our area how many hours we supply and the different places. That's what we're trying to look at here. So keeping these things in mind, we are trying to really look at the complex theory approach for water quality sensor placement. See, for us, in fact, next I think Dr. Munvalli is going to talk about the water quality a lot. So where all you can place the sensors, how do you get the signal? And for that, we are actually doing a algorithm developed through complex network theory. And there are various measures of handling this. Expected time to detect the contamination, Z1. Expected population at risk prior to the detection, Z2. Expected outcome of volume of contaminated water consumed prior to detection. That means it's already gone, Z3. The detection likelihood, Z4. Using all these statistics, we tried to develop to reach this. We tried to develop a model using the complex network theory, and we are able to show that the present model, in fact, our method is at the bottom. As you can see here, we are able to detect quite a bit of the things in terms of the water quality sensor placement. So these events we created in the mathematical model, we try to develop, and also we have operated on whatever the data we have collected in the field to really look at what can be done. So the water quality state, and another thing we need to really look at how to measure the water quality state as well as the parameter estimation under dynamic system, how the things are changing. So in there are different Kalman filter based techniques which we have developed, and then I'm only sharing with you. See, what is the interesting point is not only the state, the parameter estimation also can be done as MOLA using Kalman filter. This is again, we have done it along with Anjana. This is in ASC, I suppose. So what I want to show you is possible to, when you have all this data coming into picture, you can develop robust mathematical models to predict what's going to happen to that. And there are various mathematical tools available. You can use it and build models. And then there are different ensemble Kalman filter techniques. I'm not going to get into those details, but only I'm trying to indicate to you the possibility of developing such strong models where you will be able to predict what will happen to water quality in the pipe network, both in terms of the state. That means the water quality, how much is the water quality attenuation has taken place, and parameters, whether it is the overall parameter, bulk parameter, or in terms of the wall parameter, how it can be estimated. I'll just flip through that. Now, coming back to our own imprint model, we are trying to develop the water quality attenuation model by picking up the data in the field. We try to do that, and then the real-time data, we are actually picking it up and trying to understand how the systems behave overall. And then can we fit a overall water quality model to this and understand what is happening to the system? So as I mentioned to you, the hydraulic model, water quality model, all that we are trying to do for in this imprint area, and the existing online residual chlorine sensors in the study area, the data has been picked up. Real-time water quality information is collected to monitor and analyze the water network health of the system. We are trying to do that. So as you can see, a very large number of grab sample data has been picked up, and all these plotted sample locations from 39 months worth of grab sample data has been taken. Usable data points identified by going through data month by month, quarter by quarter. Obviously, need a lot of data cleaning is required to understand what's happening to that, and coming out with the different types of categories of the data in terms of continuous system, intermittent system, whether you can put it in terms of monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, then the 2-point data systems or 3 more point data systems. So obviously, you need to really segregate and understand how the systems behave. These are the things which we can really look at. So the attenuation value, depending on the type of different data sets, the different attenuation values, we have got it. From the literature, comparing the literature, we also concluded that some of them, these data attenuation rates are acceptable, some of them are not acceptable. So obviously, we need to really look at, as it's listed there, as you can see here, in terms of the average time, that is an acceptable one. All data points, intermittent is acceptable. Then the other things, for example, the average, as I mentioned to you, intermittent average time is also acceptable to you. In fact, based on these things, we have built water quality model. Once you know the attenuation rate, you can build the water quality model for that area and understand simple thing, for example, single component, how the chlorine will attenuate given your input system, given the at the source, wherever it is coming in, what will happen, how much of chlorine is eaten away in your pipelines, one can understand that. So the basic thing will be the in terms of to obtain the field chlorine measurements to accurately calibrate and study area for drinking water pipe system, and the decay rate considering the impact of pipe material, pipe velocity, pipe diameter, flow conditions. In fact, we have made a very detailed study. Shortly, in fact, this paper will be Rucha and then Sheetal Kumar have taken a lead. This is going to go along with Dr. Rao, my colleague. This is possibly will be going to water research. We are trying to try in that journal. So basically, we are trying to compare what will happen. We have the sampling details in the continuous system, intermittent system. Not only sampling, we have build model both for continuous system and intermittent system. We have build models. I don't have the full details here, but these are the ones, and how the system will perform in terms of water quality in a continuous system and in an intermittent system. A complete evaluation has been done. Models have been built. Grab samples have been collected. Overall chlorine attenuation rates have been calculated. So all these results have been put in the context of trying to possibly come out with a paper in possibly we are trying in water research, which is a tough journal, we don't know. So when you try to look at the challenges, overall challenges that I try to look at, just recapitulating ourselves. So obviously higher temperature, more extreme, less predictable weather conditions will affect distribution of rainfall, river flows, groundwater. Of course, it will deteriorate water quality, as you can see here. Low-income groups who are living in critical parts of urban area are vulnerable to threats of water supply. This is the most important thing one should note. Variation in water availability will impact health and food security. In fact, migration of rural population to urban centers has resulted in towns and cities expanding rapidly. As I mentioned to you, more than 40% urbanization is happening. It's expected to reach 50% in the coming years. It's a huge challenging task. Distribution of rationed water to communities is a challenge due to hydraulic inequities and favoring fewer areas. See, hydraulic infrastructure, which is limiting, that automatically brings in a lot of inequity. How are you going to share the excesses to the shortages? Very easily, is it possible to transfer water? do that, you should know exactly what is happening. And to do that, you need more controls to make it happen, to bring it more towards equity. And overloading of treatment plant facility is also a real lot of concern when you try to look at because of all these things. Is it possible to build in some adaptive capacity should be built in at the city scale in the context of urban water supply? How do you build this adaptive condition, building leadership and action on climate change adaptation, define adaptation priorities, implement adaptation processes? When you try to look at awareness to climate change, access to climate change information, all that will be important. The adaptation priorities, how to link to developed priorities, build technical capacity, build institutional support, and to implement adaptation processes, ensure understanding of need for implementation across government departments, strengthen technical capacity, which is the most important thing. Many of our own government departments don't have the technical capacity, link to other relevant development initiatives, space for reevaluation and reflection responses. These are all some of the things when you try to look at. And when you try to look at, people talk about future water or water future, whatever you want to call it. So importance of water in the sector in the near future is definitely, we are understating it. Honorable PM itself in the recent Independence Day celebrations, he called for the Jal Jeevan Mission, which has been very, very aggressively implemented, being very closely involved. I can share that what is happening here. So more than 350 lakh crores to improve the water infrastructure has been given. More drop in the irrigation sector, wastewater and saltwater treatment, water awareness programs, reviving water bodies is also talked about. Most important thing, every household tap connection is also been announced, which is the one which people are talking about it, which becomes very, very important. So in this context, the water safety plan becomes very, very important, whether it's the structural integrity, water quality integrity, water quantity and quality systems maintenance. All this becomes very, very important. In this context, to prevent water contamination from catchment to consumer, you have the headwaters, you are the consumer at the far end of the city. How are you going to make sure the right quantity and quality of water reaches from the catchment up to the consumer? Prevent recontamination during storage and distribution becomes very, very important. Prevent cross-contamination from sewer lines, which obviously all the utilities will be running parallel to each other, which is especially in terms of in our system where it's a pressurized and depressurized system, there is a very high chance of sewer systems getting connected to the water lines. Optimization of treatment plant performance and enhancing water quantity. And of course, into this you can add the continuous monitoring from catchment to consumer at various stages, in terms of monitoring devices, sensors, actuators, controllers. All this becomes very, very important. That only will try to give us some understanding of what is happening. When you try to look at in terms of the smart city mission, which are all connected. So obviously cities are the engines of growth for the economy of every nation. Nearly 31% of India's current population lives in urban areas, contribute 63% of India's GDP. I'm not telling that we should move from agriculture to the industrial in the other aspects of generation, but at the same time, we should also recognize that cities will play a dominant role. It's already playing. In the coming years, it will play a more dominant role. So obviously, the water supply systems to all these cities becomes very, very important. It's expected to house more than 40% of the population, contribute to 75% of the GDP by 2030. These are all the Planning Commission information, as you can see. Basic philosophy is to adopt a comprehensive plan, and sewage treatment being the most important one when one need to really look at in terms of recycling and reuse of water becomes extremely important. And I think coming back to our own urban flood, I think my own colleagues, Professor Mujumdar and then Shubha would have talked a lot about urban flood. I'm not going to talk about it. What I'm going to talk about it in terms of the harvesting rainwater, the urban flood water, understanding in terms of its linkages with the local groundwater system. To this effect, we are trying to look at one of the things is testing and implementation of rainwater harvesting units to harvest and reuse flood water. And basically, when you try to look at it, it's observed more than 119 square kilometers of area based on the BDA LULC mapping. So this is available for rainwater harvesting, and based on the historical rainfall data, we can harvest about 18% of the city's water demand. So local harvesting is possible. And at the same time, please also understand, when you try to do this rainwater harvesting at that place, that much of flood effect is going to reduce. So all these things are through the actual data which has been analyzed, and the data has been extracted to build up area from LULC map of the BDA rooftop rainwater harvesting, and all these things can be has been modeled to understand how it's going to happen. And a more accurate mapping of the area of rainwater harvesting is planned. Of course, we are planning for LIDAR, but I think it's taking quite some time. But we also have the NRSA data. We have analyzed the data to understand how the footprint will be. One of the key things which we did, in fact, one of my students, Dhanraj, along with the Kaushika, he has also done identification of potential groundwater recharge zones in the Bangalore area. So for this, various layers of information of the groundwater system has been analyzed in terms of geology, soil maps, land use pattern, geomorphology. Many of these, all these data, as you can see on the right hand side, many of these data have been analyzed in the layers of information to come out with the possible recharge areas in terms of, so to this, in fact, we have used the analytical hierarchy process along with the weighted linear combination technique, which was applied to identify the groundwater potential zones for recharge. And of course, depending on the criteria, as you can see, geomorphology, geology, lineament density, LULC, soil, drainage density, slope, then the rainfall, all these things. So the different weights were given, and we have come out with the type of the potential zone, recharge zones, possible recharge zones. This is the type of the system which is used here, the weighted list, the method, weighted linear combination method, they using that analytical hierarchical processes in terms of the weighted index. As I mentioned to you, all the different areas are all considered, and then you come out to the output will be in terms of the recharge areas. This is the output. The potential groundwater recharge zones has been calculated. As you can see here, the center portion of Bangalore, it is showing the red portion where it is less prone for recharge, less this thing for recharge, whereas the outer zones are good for recharge, which is also expected because the core city of the Bangalore and the central portion is more of hard rock areas, where the weathered portion is also smaller, and the other portions that move away from the things as the city drains into three different valleys in terms of KC Valley, Hebbal Valley in the north, KC Valley in the east, and Vrishabha Valley in the south. These are all little more amenable for groundwater recharge areas. And this has come out with that. And the whole idea of showing this is an interaction between surface water, where you are storing tanks, or the rainfall water it falls, how much you can store, how much is possible in the natural process can be calculated using tools like this. Anywhere the recharge can vary from 3 to 8% is possible in terms of the recharge areas. You know, that's what it shows. Unless we force it, people talk about it creating shafts and other things and trying to send the water. Please, one should understand that especially in our system where the storm water and possible sewage mixing can happen, or the land use can contribute to a lot of changes in the water quality. We should not contaminate the deeper groundwater by sending without treatment. If we want to send groundwater through the proper shafts and all can be created, send it to the deeper aquifers, it has to be treated to the drinking water standards or even more than that. So the need is there. When you treat it to such a high level, possibly there will be a need to utilize such water. It's a balance which one really has to take a call. So this is the inferences which are drawn in terms of identification of groundwater potential zones to recharge areas. As I mentioned to you, the central portion of the Bangalore is classified as a poor groundwater recharge potential zone, as well as the outer regions are a much better groundwater recharge areas which can be thought about it. Another thing which we are also trying out is the testing of porous pavement technology. In fact, Kaushika and then Dhanraj and Vanishri, they are trying to do that, trying to look at, of course, as I mentioned, it is a part of our urban water project. which Professor Mujumdar is leading, and Shubha is also a part from KSN DMC. We are trying to look at developing a porous concrete and trying to see how much of water can be stored locally and then allow it to slowly seep into the groundwater system. And we are the experimental setup, Kaushika and other group members are going to conduct those things. And we are also developed a CFD model for such a thing in terms of developing a porous concrete channel itself, whether how much of recharge can happen. Please understand that if the water table is high, all these things will not work because the water table, there is nothing to recharge. If the water table is a little low, it is possible to recharge them. A few more things I want to just share it with you. I'm a part of the developing IUWRM guidelines, Integrated Urban Water Resources Management Guidelines for Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. It's going to be circulated and shortly come out with possibly as a manual, along with Jacobs Engineering, Mr. Gaurav Bhatt. So the whole idea here is to look at how to develop these guidelines and come out with the activities. So one of the outlays in all these things will be the background. Why do you require IWRM approach is needed? As you can see here in this cartoon here, you have water supply from the catchment area, which is going to move through in the river system. Some of them we are going to pick it up and then use it to the city and then put it back into the system. Then recycled water reuse also will be there. How are you going to bring in different balances among all these components? How do you do the design? What are the principal important points which need to be addressed? All these things we are trying to address in this IUWRM approach. Approach and methodology is given. Water demand estimates, that becomes the most important thing. Demand estimates, managing demand and supply, developing city water balance, institutional considerations. Is it possible to do in the same institution? For example, just to give you an example, right now in Bangalore, the storm water is handled by BBMP, whereas the other components of water supply as well as the sewage treatment and disposal is handled by BWSSB. Should it not be single water institution is a big question which anybody can ask. Most important thing, financial sustainability. Is it possible? Unless, somehow in our system, everything is so much subsidized, the systems, unless there is a government support system, it's going to collapse. Many of these systems are not only highly subsidized, it is energy intensive. So who is going to bear the cost? So IEC activities, case studies, these are all becomes very, very important. So when you try to look at the water supply and water demand process to map available for water source, which are the sources for the city, source characterization based on the end users' quality needs, methodology to develop integrated and diverse water portfolio, identifying infrastructure requirements, developing water demand estimates for different water users, introducing water efficiency measures, stakeholder engagement program, applicability of dynamic operating model, that means integrating data streams, what we were talking about for water system optimization. These are all some of the things. Of course, I'm going to show you only 3-4 slides or 4-5 slides. It's a huge document which has been presented to MOHUA. So there is the institutional considerations, financial sustainability and IEC. So creation of an overarching framework of institution mechanism for water management, need and role for water regulator. In fact, we don't have a water regulator like energy regulator. Required policy and monitoring measures, coordination mechanism to implement IUWRM plan, measure to develop financial sustainability, tariff, taxes, transfers, project delivery, applicable models, market-based financing, PPP, so bringing in private players, which is in a very limited way, it is happening, but not much. And means of public education, outreach, engagement, all these things really need to be looked at. So this is the plan to practice when you try to look at national, international good practices we have talked about in IUWRM. As I mentioned to you, have colored up, but the good examples are Singapore. We always talk about it. And of course, our own thing, Chennai has done in a lot of rainwater harvesting. Bangalore applied not only rainwater harvesting, they have done a lot of things about the monitoring and dashboarding, bringing in sensors and devices, so many. And of course, as I mentioned to you, the recycled water usage, not only for the city itself, giving it to the neighboring areas. That's where I'm talking about the Kolar water supply in this context. In not only Kolar, I should also mention there is one Chikbalapur, Anekal, many schemes are coming up. They're also thinking of treating Vrishbhavati to a tertiary level treatment and storing it in TG Halli and treating it again and bringing it back into Bangalore. Of course, all these things require a very dedicated thing from government to make such decisions. And of course, most important thing is the public education in terms of if you have treated water to the highest standards, it can be blended and used back again for including potable purposes, which is the most challenging one. And of course, template for developing a city water balance plan. We already have that template. And of course, recommended water quality standards for drinking water, treated water, etc. Of course, people are talking about smart cities. Obviously, whenever you talk about a smart city, adequate water supply is one of the topmost agenda. Honestly, I do not know how it is listed. If you ask me, but I will put it water as one of the key components of any smart city. And of course, energy will be there, sanitation will be there, urban mobility, affordable housing, robust IT connectivity, good technology-based governance, sustainable environment, safety and security of citizens, education, all these things. And honestly, I do not know. One of my students has put all these things, whether it is in this order, I'm not sure. But then for me as a water person, whenever you talk about a smart city, it should have a smart water supply, adequate water supply, a sustained water supply. That is the key element of any smart city. And when you try to look at the way forward, distribution network monitoring and analysis for sufficient water operation and you are told reduction, monitoring, measuring, modeling of groundwater and aquifer systems, use of satellite and other modern technologies for monitoring water bodies, source protection, rainwater harvesting, black and grey water treatment and reuse for non-potable purposes, supply demand management models really need to be looked into, asset management, because we all know the assets are all getting aged. How are you going to manage them? It's all the engineering questions. You need different models which are available to be implemented. Stormwater collection, treatment, and reuse. This is what we were talking about in the floodwater harvesting. You really need to really collect it in the different water bodies and then use them after treatment. ICT application, I already mentioned to you. In all these things, you really require the ICT application. And disaster management, like urban flooding. How are you going to handle that? All these, unless you have a continuous monitoring mechanisms, models in near real time. I'm sure my colleagues would have talked to you a lot about it, how we are already doing it. Identification of alternate sources of water. For the city, unless you have plans for alternate sources in another 30 years, things like that, I think we'll fall short of whatever we are doing our job. Well, I think without acknowledgement, obviously I will not move. And one of the key things, my students do a lot of work. In this case, Sheetal Kumar Bharanidharan, Anjana, she is a scientist engineer with Hitachi now, Rucha Vaidya, Saved Gode, and Priyanka. And of course, Gaurav Bhatt of Jacobs Engineering, and we, along with whom I work a lot for IUWRM plan. You should also see that IUWRM is a component of IWRM. Obviously, any city will be a part of the bigger basin or a catchment. So it's a small part of that. And how each city should sustain is the question which you are asking in terms of not only quantity, quality, institutional, finance, everything what we talked about it. So I think I will stop here. I think exactly, I think 10:30. Shiv Prasad had told me 1.5 hours and half an hour discussion. We'll have a lot of time for discussion. Feel free to ask me any question. I brought in many of my own activities in the connecting hydrology and hydraulics. It's more a learning for all of us. Thank you, Professor Shiv Prasad, and thank you, Madam Shiv Prasad, and all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for a fluent and nice explanation of many things. I think it is very difficult to digest all the things. However, thanks for a very good thing. One thing is, I think if participants, yes, you can just ask directly, or otherwise you can put it in chat. Both the things, okay. If the time is available, I think better to interact directly.
Yeah. Come on video and identify yourself and ask. I think it will be.
You please identify yourself, your name and organization, okay, And if you are a research student, you say research student, and then please interact whatever that is required. Yeah, please.
Professor Shiv Prasad, before I forget, these slides will be available. You just tell me, I can send it. You can make a PDF and share it with people.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. You just share it to me. I will put it.
Yeah, so that they will have it. They can leisurely see
Okay.
it.
Sure, 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 sir. Sir, you can just unshare it
Oh, sorry.
so that you can interact with the people.
How do I unshare again? Yeah. Oh, stop sharing.
Stop sharing. Yeah, you are right. Yes. Now we can see the people. Yes, yes, please. Any?
Yeah.
Mugdha Kshiyasagar, you wants to say something? Mugdha?
Yes, sir. I would like to ask one question. Am I audible
You
clearly?
please, introduce yourself. You please introduce yourself.
Sir, I am Professor Mugdha Kshiyasagar from Symbiosis Institute of Technology, Pune.
Oh, nice.
I wanted to know, sir, that in this smart making in Indian context, making our urban areas smart, what is the role of decentralized solutions, different decentralized solutions which are also available in the research domain? So its implementation and its role, how effective it will be, those will be.
Yeah, definitely it's very useful. This is what we call divide and win. Okay, so for example, one small example I'll take it. In fact, Pune city is a smart city. They are looking at for smart water supply. Incidentally, I'm involved with that. I can share it with you. Some small. The problem will be you divide the whole city into so many DMAs. Okay, so district metering areas. Then you make sure that the required quantity of water at the right time, at the right with pressure is available at the entry of these DMAs. So imagine there will be so many DMAs, maybe 50 or 80 DMAs in Pune city. They are competing with each other. The source, whatever is coming in, has to first make sure that this much quantity and that much pressure is available at the entry points of these DMAs. In turn, because of the both flow is available, flow rate is available as well as pressure, required pressure is available, it will be supplied into the area as they required. So that way, you can call it, this is a decentralized system, because from the source itself, it is coming in, getting divided. Imagine like a tree, the main line is coming, and imagine like leaves, each one of them coming out on the stem. So if you have control at the entry points, you have better control. And many things in a decentralized system, they really definitely, people encourage that. We should also understand that for all these DMAs, for all these decentralized systems, these are all the nerve center entry points. For some reason, that doesn't work. That whole DMA suffers. Okay, there is no other connection unless you make some other connection. Definitely, this decentralized one is the one people talk about. It should be done.
Thank you, sir. Thank
you. Any others, please? Yes, please raise your hands or put your hands, or you can put it. Yeah, Ajit Nirmale. Mr. Ajit Nirmale, please. You switch on your audio and start speaking. Ajit. Mr. Ajit Nirmale.
Is maybe muted or?
No, you please unmute yourself. Please unmute. Okay. He has some, sir, mic problem. His query is how you look forward for limiting percentage of water from agricultural use to provide urban water supply. He's from Valmi, Aurangabad.
Fine. How do you limit?
How you look forward?
Oh, okay, fine.
For limiting percentage of water from agricultural use.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, which all of us are aware. But yeah, I'm more a city water engineer as well as researcher as well as a irrigation also. Anyway, the point is all of us know, Ajit, that more than 80 to 85% of water goes for agriculture. There is no doubt we require that agriculture water, because we need to grow food for 1.2 billion people. 1.3. Let me get corrected. 1.3 billion people. We need water. There is just no doubt about it. But when you look at the efficiency, just for more academic discussion, when you look at the efficiency, it is even for about a groundwater based system, it is around 40 to 50%. A canal based system, it is 30 to 40%. Okay, the water delivery versus the what we grow or things like that. Then when you try to look at on the other side, flip side of it, which also I told you also, the anywhere the losses are more than 40 to 50%, more than 40-45% in Indian cities. Okay, and towns it is still worse because we don't spend money. So the problem will be, why I'm emphasizing that is, each the group tries to point finger at the other, saying that you are more inefficient than we, but both are inefficient. So that way, I think the credit should go to many of the irrigation systems. I can share it with you. At many places, drip irrigation is coming up. Okay, and then many places, in fact, pipeline-based irrigation systems are coming up. Instead of canals, the big pipelines, huge pipelines are used to transfer water, so that it's not only the losses, they are also talking about controls. A pipe control is a much better control than open channel control, which is not easy. And then any change in state happens very fast in a pipe system, but we need to spend more money. So I think that way, both the systems have to improve their efficiency. And then the other thing is, in case of need, I can share it with you. Take for example, big cities like Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore or something like that. I can talk for Bangalore. When there is a need, they will forego one crop and give water to the city. It doesn't mean that they should not support the farmer. They should support in some way. They should give money for them for the loss of their crop. So that is like environmental services, and make it happen.
Shatrugna Singh? Dr. Shatrugna Singh, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes.
You can switch on your video also, if possible.
Sure.
Yes, you are.
Hello, sir. My name is Dr. Shatrugna Singh, and I am assistant professor at Amity University, Rajasthan, Jaipur.
Oh, right.
I would like to actually bring to attention about the sensitiveness of the people or the workers, especially in the water supply departments at the state level or the central level, that how much sensitive they are when you report about leaking or something in the pipelines. Why I am saying it, because in my experience, I have found that they are pretty much insensitive about the loss of the water that is happening on the roads. Whether they need to be educated about it, or they need to be trained about it, or they should, respond rapidly and understanding that it is a very, very important resource which is being lost, per minute or a per hour basis. Just few days back, I called at home and I realized the tube well that supplies water, drinking water and water for our regular use to our home, and because of the rain and all, something happened, and it got blocked, and then somehow it started malfunctioning, and it took almost 10 days for them to fix it. It is a very, very small thing, but then in a larger context, it shows that how much sensitive they are towards it. So how, when we are planning about smart cities and all, why we can't make our workers smart enough to understand this?
I understand, Shatrugna Singh. I can see your point. See, first of all, I think it applies to each one of us. Like you said, we are academicians. They are field engineers. Somebody is a researcher. Somebody is something else. Each one of us should have a passion to our work. Okay, whatever the passion. Why, whatever, that is the passion. And if that passion is not there, the commitment to do whatever it is required to do my job, that I agree with you. It's not luckily with everybody. With some people, it's missing. Why chalta hai attitude? What they say, I don't know.
Right.
But in Kannada we say, Shiv Prasad will understand me. Nadiyate. That means chalta hai. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I lose some water. And there are people who will argue, which is a little odd. The leaking pipeline will help groundwater. I am of that view. That's not the way to recharge groundwater. There are 1,000 ways of doing it. Not that. How to create this passion in them so that you do your job and everything is taken care of. I think there must be a lot of this educational programs, contact programs, and the people talking to them, making sure that you do your job, well, everything is taken care of, type of stuff need to be brought in. Then all the more the reason it is like yesterday in some other context I was talking with somebody. Water supply is no longer only a civil engineer's job or a geologist's job. Okay, it is a job of a microbiologist, a control engineer, a data scientist. More important, a social engineer, as you're talking about. It's his job to make sure you do your job well. Type of stuff need to be brought in. There are people luckily who listen. There are many people who are not. And the another thing is also there very many times, very odd. They are asked to do the job. They don't have money to do anything. Even a small repair, he has to buy some small whatever, some tap or some pipe piece or some welding manual to give. Nobody trusts him or her, that engineer. It is very odd. Trusted and then given. I think we need to change has to happen. Because I asked them to mute. Kindly mute yourself.
Please mute yourself.
Kindly mute yourself, sir. Thank you, sir.
RK Prasad ji.
I entirely agree with you. This has to change. It's changing here and there. One example I'll give you. Somehow very passionate about these things. Traveled around the world. Maybe I have gone to more than 40 countries. What is several countries? I've never seen anything in Japan not working on any given random day. It could be an escalator, it could be a lift, it could be something else.
Right, sir.
I think get into that type of thing. It takes time. It takes time. Things are changing, but we should not give up. We should push Maple and make it happen and use technology to detect. It's not just the question of this thing. The technology is available. You can make out where it is leaking, what is happening, send photos. This is where NGOs play a dominant role more than you and me. Because they have the power to do it, they have the capacity to do it. Bombard the guy with photographs and then things like that.
Yes, sir. Actually, on the same line, what you said about the technological interventions. Because, like for example, in the traffic systems, we have like that, signals and all. And if signals are not working, there is a centralized facility. That's where they can actually watch and they can find out that which particular signals or where the signal is not working, and they can go and immediately fix it, within a given time period. But why can't they do something like that in the water supply systems, where they can identify that, in which particular region or where the something has happened in the pipeline and we should go and check it immediately?
Definitely. Chaturanga Singh, it's definitely possible. First of all, they should build all the data which they have. GIS based layers, all the data has to be put in a central place. Then it's not just putting it and then keeping it. In fact, it happens in Bangalore. I was talking to somebody else yesterday, I was talking about it. They should use it. The local engineer, he will have a tablet and he can see his area, pipelines coming in, and then he knows which is the inlet, where is the outlet, what is the status of my pipeline. Then linked with the photographs which people send, fourth cross, fifth line, blah, 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 all that. Technology has to be used day in and day out. It should be a part of the system. If I talk about a technology, I talk about a math model which I never use it, it's as good as, fine, I may get a paper out, that's fine. That's to that extent fine academically. But if that algorithm is implemented, if it is running, I'll be more than happy to see why I showed that polar. I'm fully involved with all that. Those things are all happening. It's there. So you are right. I think it has to be brought in. More important, I will say, the youngsters should get in. They are technologically very savvy. And then, you should bombard them with all this data which is coming in. Apps should be developed. You give it to your NIT, Jaipur College or somebody, they will develop 100 apps and give you what can be done. Those things should develop more and more. Then the data being used again and again only improves the quality.
Yes.
If data is not used, it's as good as worthless. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the response.
Mona Kakkar?
Yeah. Can I ask, sir?
Yes, please.
Hello. Yeah.
R.K. Prasad,
Good morning to all of you. I am R.K. Prasad, Professor of Civil Engineering, Northeastern Regional Institute of Science and Technology. Sir, I was my examiner during my PhD period. I have worked in contaminant transport with Professor Sasi Mathur. I have a question related to, sir, first of all, I am very happy to see you. Still, you are so active.
He is a good friend of mine, very good friend of mine.
Yes, sir, I know. Sir, my question is related to water distribution network. You have said very rightly that there is a many inequality in a water supply, not only in a way to supply and demand only. There are some users which is getting enough water, some users are not getting any requirement to any even required water. So, and also you have said that we can manage these with the help of the various kinds of valves like pressure regulating valve, pressure sustaining valve, etc. So actually, but these all, if we talk of in a big city, it will be very difficult to maintain manually. So is it possible in Indian context, even for a small city, to manage all these things smartly?
Definitely. That's the goal, ultimate goal, Prasad. That's the ultimate goal. A fully automated system running. I can show you here. That's where I said, of course, I'm sure there are very many things. You come to IISc campus. We have, as I said, Professor Mujumdar, Shekhar, myself, we were all involved. A real time, the wastewater plant is running. Okay. On demand, it supplies. There is a variable speed drive pump which is running. And depending on the things, automatically on demand, the pipeline will adjust and then it will pump water out. So it's a 24/7 on demand supply which is running. So it's not difficult for us to build. As you said, we need to showcase and show where it is possible. In some places, it could be a pilot or a slightly bigger area. Like they say, success, you can copy success, somebody, I have done it and somebody else. So overall, suddenly you cannot make it to the whole city because it's not possible. For various reasons, because you are dealing with a live system, because you have to give water supply. You cannot stop it, isn't it? But then if you were to try in a smaller area, show that it happens and it will repeat by itself. More important, lot of investments are required. More important, lot of technological interventions are required. And we should maintain it. It's possible. It's not a difficult thing to do. This is exactly now Singapore is running completely 24. I mean, every. So when Singapore can do, why not Pune? Why not Bangalore? Why not Hyderabad? I mean, the list is long. Prasad, was I your examiner? I've forgotten. I don't know. Was I your PhD examiner?
No. Contaminant transport, sir. Bioremediation. I have worked in bioremediation, sir.
Okay. Was I your examiner with Shashi Mathur? I have forgotten. So.
I had worked with Professor Sasi Mathur. I was a student of Professor Sasi Mathur. He was my examiner, sir.
Oh, that's what. Thank you. That's what I was. The other day I was just looking at it, Professor Prasad. Some 50 PhD theses I evaluated.
Right. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Dr. Mona?
Yeah. Sir, one question. In your presentation, sir.
Please introduce yourself, madam.
Yes. Sir, I'm associate professor at CET University, Ahmedabad, Gujarat. So, sir, I wanted to ask one question. You mentioned in your presentation that there is this treated wastewater which are being part of the system wherein they are filling the lakes in the Bangalore. So if at all we are doing that, that's available around the year. So then we cannot use the lakes or the depressions for the rainwater harvesting, which you mentioned at the time of flood in the Bangalore city. I mean, then we have to discount the lakes if we are putting the treated wastewater in it, because that flow is round the year. We cannot have it during the monsoon. So what is your say on that? Or is it strategized in some other way for Bangalore?
Perfectly correct. So first of all, small correction. It is not Bangalore lakes are not filled. The lakes in Kolar, which is about 130 kilometers away,
Okay.
being filled. One of the things which has happened in Kolar is that in that area, for whatever reason, these catchments are deteriorated, and these lakes or the tanks, we call it in Kannada, Kere in Kannada, they were not getting filled. So the whole idea is to fill about 50% of its capacity using this treated water. It is a secondary treated water for groundwater recharge. So other 50% is left for the local catchment to contribute. Okay. And as you said, is very important. In fact, even in Bangalore, suppose they were to fill these tanks, let us say, many of these tanks are all agricultural tanks, irrigation tanks, ages back.
Yes.
Fixed control. They don't have any automatic control gates. They have the overflow weir, typical of anything. When you fill 100%, based on the level, it will spill, and then it is goes further down. Is a chain of tanks. The upstream tank has to fill, then it will. After that, the downstream tank will get filled, and then it goes like one after another chain of tanks. In fact, many cities are thinking. In fact, even in Bangalore, though it's not done.
So Bangalore has this Jakur Lake, Putenhalli Lake. I think other lakes are also a few examples are there wherein they are putting the treated water over there.
I'm fully aware.
Yeah.
Because I am the technical committee chairman for BWSSB, and I've also seen these things. You are right, perfectly right. Jakur, all that. Still, there are no gates to control.
Yes.
Once it's filled up, only the spill will go. What I'm trying to convey here is, as you rightly said, if you were to have gates, depending on what water is going to come, I can open the gate and then decide, keep the cushioning and allow water to flow. So the problem in many of these areas is downstream of all these bunds which have been formed from ages, lot of habitation have happened. So when you want to put any of these gates and control all that, one has to be extremely careful and take care of it. And the analysis also need to be done. How much we can store, how much we can let it out, all that calculations have to be done, which is a fantastic hydrological problem. How much is the catchment will yield, how much we have to open the gate, and how much has to be done in terms of in a small, all these tanks. If you try to go for a bigger event, which is a little unfortunate event, when you try to look at right now, Maharashtra cannot store all that water because very heavy rainfall is happening. And the blame goes from Karnataka side. You're waiting for a long, very last minute. Now you're opening the gate. Why you didn't open, say, for example, last week or something else? These are all very easily said than done. For example, you need to understand the catchment characteristics, rainfall, runoff process, estimate how much may appear at the dam, and assuming that it's going to the time of concentration, lead time, you should open the gate, make sure it flows out. So all these things are a very challenging questions, which we are understanding, but very slowly. And you are perfectly correct. We need to get into that mode. Coming back to this question, all these tanks need to be understood as storages. We need to be ready to for the flood waters to be stored. We need to get that. Small correction: this recycled water is going to Kolar. About 100.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Praveen Kumar from NITK Surathkal, research scholar. Praveen Kumar. Mr. Praveen, please unmute yourself. Praveen Kumar from Surathkal. Please unmute yourself. Praveen, are you hearing? Okay. His mic is not working. His query is, sir, he is a research scholar from NITK Surathkal.
Fine.
He says that if we go for sponge cities, is it possible in our country? And how much percentage of runoff we can reduce it?
Fine. Definitely, his name was what from Surathkal? What is his name? Prasanth? Praveen Kumar. Thank you for the question. Definitely, depending on the water table thing, the sponge cities are possible. Okay, but it doesn't mean that everywhere we can recharge. Please understand, all of us, we think that whatever waterfalls, everything we can recharge. The rate at which the waterfalls and the rate at which the surface water flows, you recollect all your variable area, I mean the moisture content, infiltration things, characteristics and all. It's not easy to push water in a natural system. To some extent you can. And the whole idea of all these tanks and things like that, as you can hold at depressions and water tanks, carriers, tanks everywhere, lakes, whatever, you will have a slow infiltration. Talking about our own southern places, we have a soil zone, then you have a weathered portion, then you have a deeper aquifer or a hard rock region in southern Deccan Plateau. Whereas in the northern thing, you have alluvium. It's a completely similar strata right through, and then you can store large amount of water. So especially recharging these hard rock areas and all are not easy. But then the percentage will be anywhere from, in a natural system, will be from anywhere to 3 to 8% of the rainfall. That is what the natural recharge systems are possible. That is where they say that as much as possible, hold water at many places so that it slowly percolates deep inside into the weather portion, then further down into the deeper aquifer. Especially the recharging deeper aquifer takes a very, very long time, unless there is a vertical fracture which will allow water to flow like a natural shaft, imagine, which is possible. With geological studies, you can see it's possible. In such cases, only you have to make sure good quality of water is stored in those areas. Through the natural fractures, the water can flow into deeper aquifer. And people also suggest that you can create natural shafts. Imagine the vertical shaft you create, like when a mining area or something like that. We definitely can store large amount of water, but only thing you have to make sure this water should be of very high quality.
Mallappa Madoli, you please unmute yourself. Mallappa Madoli, please.
He's saying thank you.
Okay, then okay, then yeah, we are nearing to end of Professor's lecture. Any others? Last chance, please. Last chance. Anyone wants to interact with the professor? Anyone is interested to interact with professor? Please. Please unmute yourself, because I have not muted any of you people. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, so thank you, sir. Think there is no questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Nice interaction and nice information and many research. All research scholars, they have got many areas to work. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
So once again, on behalf of G.V. Pant University of Agriculture and Technology, and also on behalf of Atal Academy of AICTE, we thank Professor Mohan Kumar sir for delivering an excellent lecture and also good interaction with the participants. Yeah, we hope to do in future physically also at Pantnagar, because sir, we are trying from the last so many days or years, I should say. We could not invite him to Pantnagar after because of this COVID and other things. And earlier also, we missed him a lot at many occasions. We hope you will be at Pannagar during the shorter time if all other things are okay. Anyway, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
Namaste, namaste, sir. Thank you, please.
Sir, hello,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Hello, sir. Sir, hello, sir. Sir,
yes, please.
Sir, namaste, sir. Mohan Kumar, sir.
Namaste, Malappa. Please.
Yes, sir. Actually, I am working as assistant professor in Chintamani, sir, which comes under Chikbalapur and Kolar region only.
Tell me.
Yes, sir. Sir, and here we are serving with a farming community also, teaching and research and extension.
Okay.
So, in practically, we are seeing and sometimes we are interacting with farming community regarding they are just using the KC Valley water, sewage water.
Right.
So, actually, the main purpose is to first we need to recharge it, then we can use it through borewell, sir. That is the criteria. But
not
sometimes,
even borewell, Malappa. I will say dug well.
Yes, sir, dug well. Yes, sir, yes, sir. First, they release the water to lake. But sometimes farmers are directly using the sewage water to just, they are living into the farms. So, my question is, sir, one simple question.
Change the terminology, not sewage water. You call it recycled water.
Yes, treated water. Yes, sir, treated water. Sir. Okay, sir, sorry, sir. Treated water, sir. Yes, sir.
No.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, I have a problem.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, my thing is, if scenario is 100% correct, okay, Amit, the 100% treated and properly it is going to be recharged into the borewell or a dug well, whatever it may be, then we are using the water, that water for the agriculture purpose. Then how many years it will take? Like sometimes treated water also, sometimes it may have some heavy metals with it. Sometimes there are different scenarios. Directly, like as I said, directly they are going to use treated water.
I'll jump and reply to you. I understand because there is not much time. I think next is my Dr. Munvalli is next. I don't want to eat away his food. Okay.
Okay, sorry, sir.
First of all, no heavy metals in this water, Malappa. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
There is no heavy metals. I don't want to offline. We can talk separately. And maybe you can even have Professor Shivrasad also.
Okay, sir.
This case went up to Supreme Court. So I'm 100. So, but first of all, no treated water, secondary treated water. If you allow it to go through soil strata, pick it up in a well, it will be of much better quality than what it is. Then the whole thing is they are not supposed to lift it directly from the swings. Okay, it's actually officially banned, but it is not our job. It's the district deputy commissioners or their job or something. They put criminal cases. We leave it. As far as the quality is concerned, if you allow it to go through the soil strata, pick it up in a well, it will be definitely better quality.
Okay, sir.
Okay. No heavy metals.
Okay, thank you, sir. That is my doubt, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, 1 minute. Shivrasad, sir.
Munvalli is there. Namaskar.
Sir,
Nice to hear.
Sir, you are on.
Nice to hear my professor after a very long time. So I wanted to thank him through your platform.
No, Munvalli. I think I don't want to embarrass him. He was one of my star students. I will openly say that. I think all this water quality, what I taught, he only started it. I think he will take over. I think I will.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, all the best. Munvalli, thank you.
Yes.
Sir, the record stop order.
Okay, guys, we shall meet at, there is a small break. And we shall meet at 11:15, please.